So what we have decided is that we want to build a one project that is sort of bigger and is going to be between 3 and 6 months. That is a research project fundamentally by utilizing participatory technique and experimental learning. And through this project, we want to become an organization that supports NGOs that are interested, that are working on the ground in the developing world with young people, and do preparatory research in order to inform them on how to better develop their programming for a specific target group in a community. So one of the challenges that organizations face a lot is that when they go on the ground, they don't necessarily understand all the dynamics, and they don't know. Well, it's hard to understand what is needed and what is needed, what is not needed, what are the dynamics within the community. So our project would be very much merging all of the things that we've done in 100 bars and participating, also integrating new techniques and new skills, and to really do a practical learning um, to how young people relate to the community, relate to the development process, what they need, what they don't need, and how do they react to these initiatives. So, for example, when we do participate and we give the skills and then so encourage them to get organized to develop small initiatives, there are a lot of issues about how their ability to get organized. And one of the things that we've learned this year is that your ability to get organized is very much learned, is very much taught. And if you have never been organized, if you've never worked in a team, it's not going to be easy for you to work in a team.
For sure.
So what we want to do to this project is also sort of testing those things, providing space for people to get organized, understanding what are their challenges, what are the power dynamic within.
Yeah, and then as a group internally, you can figure out like what works well, like how can you teach disability and stuff like that, and realize.
Well, the idea is to have this project become part of a bigger work, but that we not necessarily have the capacity of doing. So one of the things that got really frustrated is that we did this incredible research project in Esmeraldas, and then we don't have the capacity to follow up and say, okay, we have identified a lot of needs, we know how to work here, we have learned so much, but we don't have the capacity to continue doing programming in this region at this point. And so that's really frustrating.
That's really frustrating.
Because you're like, well, okay, I said that, what does it mean? So that's why we want to really learn or expand this idea of what does it mean to work in cooperation. And the idea of cooperation versus competition is a big topic in the nonprofit sector. Because as you know, the field right now looks, the environment of charities and nonprofits in Canada and in the world looks pretty much like this. There is no funding, and so organizations are applying to the same funding, and they are competing with each other,
eating each other's funds,
which is, to me, the opposite of what the nonprofit sector should be doing. And we believe in cooperation very much in our organization, but then what does it mean to believe in cooperation in a practical sense? And we thought that developing a project that would become part of a bigger process that other organizations have the capacity of doing would be something that would allow our work to inform other work.
I think that's a really insightful point, though, in the fact that you're saying that it's more like, so do you think it has become more competition over cooperation, like in the framework of the nonprofit sector?
I think that there is definitely a lot of competition, and there is cooperation for sure, but it's hard to cooperate.
It is.
I almost feel it's easier to compete than to cooperate, or that's what's perceived, and it's just a switch that we need to make in really understanding what cooperation could look like. Because it's easy to say cooperation, but what happens with cooperation is that different organizations have different cultures, and so when you have your own culture within an organization, you are very much you have different standards and you have different way of looking at the world. And when you interact with another one, you are interacting with another way of dealing with the world. So there is a tension there, and learning how to cooperate with an organization it's hard.
For sure. Yeah, because it could definitely like undermine the goal of the organization if like you have to compromise a certain value in order to cooperate. Versus, I guess some people would be like, I'll just go out on my own and try and do it myself. But then one person loses, right? Like one organization loses.
And also, I think that there is a tendency, because the funding is so restrictive, an organization want to be doing everything because they're following the money.
Yeah.
And so they're saying, oh, I'm an organization that works with X, but there is money available in Y, and I'm going to do Y because there is money. And the organization kind of becomes
this huge thing that's like not, I guess, like concentrated on its initial purpose, and then it's doing like diluted little bits, but not being the best at the one thing it can do, right?
Exactly. So we have decided we want to focus on doing what we think that we would be in a better position of doing, which is understanding young people's dynamic from a youth perspective and being able to inform the development discourse through that. In the process, we would be always developing our network so that that people that we interact with would be integrated in our network and would be able to, and we would be able to fulfill our mission of fostering international dialogue and having idea sharing within this network. But the other piece of this model that is why we designed this is that this would allow also to be much more financially viable.
Yeah.
Because we would be basically the organization to whom other organization outsource a part of the work.
Good call, exactly.
So this, in this sense, it would be that the funding doesn't have to be something that is directly for us, but
you could be funded by other organizations because instead of them spending twice the amount to do it themselves, they get you to do it, and in turn it's done better and less of their time, and they can devote their time doing their own projects.
And so that there is this synergy between, okay, we're doing the research part of the thing and we're giving you another perspective that you will not be able to gain, and that is going to inform your work.
Yeah. But I think your model then therefore like makes cooperation viable because you're making it financially sustainable and like opportunistic for other organizations to come to you.
Exactly.
Right?
So the idea is to add value to the other organization, to the work of the other organization, and for us, the ideology behind this is that we want our work to have an impact. And so we can collect a lot of information, a lot of great lessons learned, but if those things are not used to inform other people's work, we are just being self-centered.
Yeah, I guess.
We are just being like, oh, we know better, but it's not useful. So that is like an important part of what this new model would look like, and we are going to be developing in the next months.
Yeah. And now, what do you think in regards to like education on like social innovation, education on development in general that you're seeing in like post-secondary institutions, universities, stuff like that? Like, what do you think the current framework is like, and where do you see it going in the future?
Okay, so I studied in England, the international development, and I studied at the University of Cambridge, where there is a specific culture about how development is approached, and in terms of economic development, and in terms of philosophically speaking, of what are the theory behind it. The theory that is a lot behind is there is a rejection of neoliberalism, which is this idea that that governments don't have a role to play in development, and that everything should be left to the market that is smarter.
Okay.
So that's
your background based on
there is a rejection of this theory that markets know everything. And also at the philosophical level, there is it's very much informed by the work of Amartya Sen, who is a philosopher who sort of was behind the idea of the Human Development Index and the concept that it is not, you cannot measure development just by seeing